Okay, Mayor, we're live.
Good evening. Welcome to the May 19th, 2020 City Council special meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock,
Present.
Councilmember Gregg,
Here.
Councilmember Meadows,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens,
Here.
Mayor Byer.
Here. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. I move approval of the agenda. Could I please have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Our agenda is approved. The next item is approval of the minutes from the May 12th meeting. I move approval of these minutes. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion about the minutes? Changes? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from May 12th, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's, I saw all the mouths move. That the minutes are approved. The next item is item 2.1, communications. The first item is all written communications that we have received are posted on the website, or actually posted on the agenda. If anybody sent something in that didn't get posted, please let me know and I will get it up. And the next is communication from the audience. So Nicole will go through the phone numbers that are listed in our participant page. And I ask that everybody limit their comments to 5 minutes, as we did last time. We passed this resolution to do that. But this time we're going to do it a little bit differently. If you have questions for specific council members, or if you want council to answer questions, or if the council wants to ask you questions, we're going to wait till the 5 minutes are over. So you can start your time. Nicole Bartel will let you know when you are 30 seconds from being finished. And then if there are any questions, you may well speak more because we might ask you questions or you have already asked us questions. So with that preamble, Nicole.
Thank you, Mayor. The first call is a phone number ending in 314. You may now address council if you'd like.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, this is Ray Lawson. I'm at 1854 Cricket Lane, East Lansing. I have helpful suggestions about the resolution entitled Police Community Relations Review Commission. My first suggestion is to make sure the objectives for which the study committee is being created is manageable within the given time. The committee's work likely will require more than 6 months and most of 12 months for scoping the work, research design, field research, deliberating, and preparing the report to the council. The second suggestion is to refine and make specific the objective for the committee's work. The committee objective of the current objective of the resolution appears to be much broader than necessary. I would recommend targeting the study to focus on best practices performed by other jurisdictions that have an independent oversight commission. Don't charge the committee with researching the current East Lansing and MSU law enforcement agencies to quantify what they might do better. Leave that to the Independent Policy Oversight Commission once established. Third suggestion is name the committee in a way that clearly communicates its purpose. This will help people decide whether to apply for membership, and it will remind all parties of the committee's objective. The current resolution title, Police Community Relations Review Commission, is both unclear and confusing. A clearer title might be Study Committee on an Independent Policy Oversight Commission. Fourth, maintain a relationship with the study committee that permits all council members to receive and act freely on the committee's report. The council should name one of its members to function as a customary liaison person, not to direct the research or vote with the committee members on the content of their report. Next, possibly the most important, to the extent possible, select 2 types of members. First, persons with life experiences relevant to the abuses being considered. Second, persons with professional skills relevant to the objective of the committee. The committee needs the insight of people from communities who have experienced abuses to be remedied by the future Independent Police Oversight Commission. Further, the study committee needs skills such as legal research, police oversight, criminal justice policy, and ethics. And the committee also needs access to expertise from independent legal counsel and should be supported for it. My sixth suggestion is that the chairperson of the committee should be someone who is neither a member of the city council nor a city employee. Also, if possible, select someone who is familiar with the subject matter and capable of establishing trust with the committee. My seventh and final suggestion is that for the council to be deliberately building community trust as it designs and creates the study committee. The committee trust will be enhanced by a clear and understandable title for the committee, by improved clarity about the ultimate objective of the study committee, by the special care in which the committee membership is solicited and selected, by a diligent search for a chairperson with the capabilities required, and by a helpful but not controlling city liaison relationship. Each of these actions will demonstrate trust-enhancing behavior and help build the community trust that is so necessary. I hope the City Council will embody these suggestions in its redesign of the resolution, and I would stand ready to answer any questions, and if requested, I would be glad to help design a special applications form for study committee membership. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vlassen. Would anybody like to address Mr. Vlassen? Councilmember Gregg.
I don't have anything to add. I just wanted to express my appreciation for Mr. Vlassen's very well reasoned and clearly worded communication that he sent us. I think that he's bang on all points.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Vlassen. Ms. Bartel.
Okay.
Thank you. The next caller on the list actually is attending with her name showing up or their name showing up. It is Rachel Sweet. Rachel Sweet, you may unmute yourself and address council if you would like.
Hello, I don't have anything to say, but hi, how are you guys doing? And I hope you're staying safe.
Thank you very much. Mayor, that concludes the list of attendees for this meeting.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is communications from the mayor and council members. I will start today with Councilmember Babcock, who's unmuted.
Thank you. Well, on the west side of East Lansing, we had quite a weekend of yards. I've been asked, and Mr. Lahanas can answer this, or perhaps Mr. House, are we going to have another free lawn pickup day yet this spring?
At this point, I do not believe we have a plan for one beyond the two. We've done two on each side of the neighborhood, but I can check with Public Works, but I do not believe so at this point. But I will check.
We were busy beavers over here, and not all of us got our bags out. So we can always take it up there ourselves too. So thank you.
Councilmember Gregg.
Hey, so I do have something that I want to talk about. I meant to write an email to everybody, but it seems like this is just as good of a forum to do that. It's with the racial justice conversation that we've been having. As we're going into the budget season, I would really like to include in our deliberations the idea of hiring some sort of outside agency to facilitate some racial equity conversations within our city, not just with the police department, but really across all of our departments and including the council as well. I specifically have been talking to Angela Austin from One Love Global, and I have a great respect for her after those conversations. I love that her message is based in love and mutual understanding and communication. I don't necessarily think that we should necessarily choose her agency among other agencies, but I mostly wanted to let the rest of the council know that that was something that was really important to me, and that it's a conversation that I'd like to have going forward.
So, Councilmember Greg, how do you want to go forward on that? Would you like to ask the city manager to look at her firm and other firms? Is that?
Yes, probably a good place to start. I'd like the rest of the council also to look at her firm and maybe even reach out to her. I found our conversation to be very, it solidified some things in my mind that I had been having a hard time articulating. So I thought it was productive. I know that time is precious to all of us, but I think knowing what our options are for some sort of expert assistance would be good. I think having somebody that's local to us is probably better than bringing in somebody from outside of the region. I think one of the things that I liked about One Love Global is that they're already doing this kind of healing work with other local communities. So that it might be a way for us to bring greater inter-community conversation, which is, none of us exist in a vacuum. So I don't have a perfectly articulated plan. I guess I'm asking you guys to help me figure out what that looks like, whether it's her company or whether it's a different facilitator.
Thank you. Councilmember Meadows.
Well, let me start off by responding to that. And I think it's an excellent idea, but I would suggest that we have a discussion at a discussion only meeting with regard to this. And I would also suggest that the Mayor Pro Tem communicate with Human Relations Commission to see how they might want to be involved in this. We did have, I thought, a very productive community conversation on racial justice, I think about 18 months ago now, and we were hoping that there would be more of those. So this is along the lines of sort of jumpstarting that again, and obviously we need to have it done. So I'm very supportive of the idea, but I think we do need to flesh it out, quite a bit more. Other than that,
I'm not presenting the completed plan by any means. It's just we have had a lack of opportunities to discuss things amongst ourselves as a council, and this is my time, so I thought I'd use it that way. But yes, it's definitely not a complete plan.
I wasn't implying it was. I just think that we need to proceed and get it to a complete plan. So I think it's very important. But the other thing I want to say is that, the governor is sort of reopening the Northland. And I know that we've had a lot of people throughout the state who have been objecting to the governor's plan to keep us safe. But it's working. And I want to say that, I really admire the fact that within East Lansing, when I do have to very occasionally go into a store or something like that, I see people wearing masks and protecting themselves. And when you see somebody who isn't, they're looked at like an outsider of some kind. So it is kind of a remarkable thing. I know nothing will ever go back to the way it was before. Some of the changes will be things that are good things that will improve the way that we deliver information to people, perhaps. But I'm really proud of the way our community, anyway, has reacted during this time frame. And thanks to, I know we thank them every time we're on TV, but thanks to all of our public employees who have continued to work to provide the services to our community during this really tough time.
Thank you. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor Byer. I second everything that was said. I definitely think a conversation with the HRC would be warranted on that. There was definitely a conversation around that kind of training before within city staff. And I think that even expanding on that, having somebody on staff who's the equity officer for city employees as well was something that was discussed. Other cities have done something similar where somebody's kind of constantly thinking of that within the works of our organization. And I know that some have expressed interest in that as well throughout the city. So I'm definitely willing to look into a few of those things. I have a few things that I wanted to talk about. The first one was earlier probably about 3-4 weeks ago, I think the council account received a couple of emails that were asking about extra masks. And I know Councilmember Greg has been making some. My family has been 3D printing ones like this that are right there. And some people are asking, where do we direct these? We have some extra. I just like to point people in the direction of places like Bircham Hills, Helping Hands, places that deal with some of the more vulnerable populations. As we move into a time period in which places start to open up, they're going to have contact with those individuals that might be in a vulnerable state, and having the proper equipment to do that is really important. So that might be a place to direct if extra resources are available to you. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was a little bit more frank. So I had many thoughts and issues with the video that I reviewed last week when it was posted publicly. Perhaps the biggest issue that I had, the thing that scared me the most of the interaction, was how such a minimal traffic violation in my eyes turned into what it did. The arrest was made for driving while having your license suspended. We talked about this offense earlier in the year, and I believe this offense has been overcriminalized across the country, and the overarching reason for that suspension usually has nothing to do with the enforcement of the driving itself. We have to uphold the law, but I don't believe we need to take such drastic action for something so minimal. I asked our city attorney where discretion lies within this offense. He informed me that there is indeed discretion around this stop, but if we were to let someone drive off and they got into an accident, we may expand our civil liability if we gave them, for instance, an appearance ticket rather than actually doing a custodial arrest. But at the end of the day, if they're not breaking the law in any other way, such as driving under the influence or reckless driving or another offense that would warrant an actual arrest, I don't see a reason why we should be making an arrest, impounding a car and going through that length to have the situation end with what is arguably the same result as an appearance ticket. An appearance ticket would maintain that they're in violation of the law, and for whatever reason they got their license suspended, but would eliminate, in my opinion, an unnecessary arrest. When it's possible to eliminate discretion that might be biased, I believe it's our job to look towards those policies. I then asked the city manager to ask the deputy chief kind of what information was available to an officer when they run the license and find out it's suspended. The deputy chief provided me with some information that was very, very helpful, that it would come up with 5 reasons why their license would show up suspended. Without going into bigger details into this, it's basically failure to comply with judgment, failure to appeal in court, unsatisfactory driving record, implied consent suspension. That's when you don't submit to a drug test or a alcohol test on the road to get your BAC, or a suspension as a result of a drunk or drug driving conviction. And I'd like to establish a policy that we don't arrest people and write them an appearance ticket instead of when their licenses ran for one of the first 3 reasons. So an FJC, FAC, or a UDR. Mostly, again, I saw a lot of things that left me with questions from that video, but I keep coming back to the fact that if that arrest wasn't really necessary, none of that would have happened. So I believe that we should change that policy. Under the direction of the city attorney, I believe that that would be something that city manager would have to do. And I would like to talk about that at a future meeting, if we could, to see what the council's opinion on that is, because I think that there are a lot of issues with what I saw. However, the thing that scares me the most is how a minimal interaction turned into what it did. And I think that we should discuss changing that policy. So I hope that we can discuss that at a future meeting if the rest of council is okay with that discussion.
From my part, I am also very interested in what Councilmember Greg has introduced as an idea. And the reason I like it is because it doesn't look just at the police. What it says is that the entire workings of the city has to address its privilege, essentially, because we're essentially a white council, predominantly white staff, and we are having this problem, the same problem we're having in the entire country, where people of color in our community don't always feel safe. And I think that the police is an obvious place to look, and that's a place where the city actually meets the people. So it's going to be the hardest and the most fraught place to deal with the issue, but we all need to deal with the issue, which is something that I'm looking forward to. Another part of the thought is that if we are going to make a change and we really want to see change, we can't just come up with rules and say change. We all have to buy into that change, and we have to live that change in our city. That's us, that's the police department, that's the fire department, that's all city staff. It has to be something everybody agrees to, everybody understands, and everybody applies in their own life, which is why I like the idea so much. So thank you for bringing that forward, Councilmember Gregg. And also I'd like to echo the city manager in thanking our staff who is out there right now with the coronavirus and the people, keeping themselves safe, keeping everyone safe, keeping the trash picked up, keeping everything policed, and keeping things from burning down and everything else that's going on from city staff. So thank you very much. Next is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Your Honor. So just a couple of quick comments in relation to what Councilmember Gregg mentioned. So we actually already have it in our strategic priorities that we presented to council and have intended on doing citywide diversity training. In the budget document that you have, I think it's page 9, city manager's budget, we have $30,000 budgeted for support for the Public Safety Oversight Committee and to provide diversity and inclusion training for city staff. That might be an area we want to add a little bit more money, perhaps, because, perhaps 30,000 might be sufficient for training all staff, but perhaps we might need a little bit more into that. So that's something we can think about if we wanted to add some money, perhaps 10 or 20,000 more dollars to that, which would not be a big issue for us. But we had intended and had talked about this last fall. It's one of our strategic priorities that we presented to council to do. We had originally planned on doing it all through the summer for all city staff. That may have to be looked at differently now, of course, because we can't bring 100 people together at a time for training. But our intent is to do that. It's in the budget, and that perhaps we would want to add a little bit more to that to make sure we have sufficient funds for it. But it's already, from our perspective, considered a priority. We have not had a chance to have the second part of that discussion with council regarding the priorities. So you remember we met in a weekend retreat and we presented it, and then we were going to schedule a time for it to come back after a month. And then we had the city closed down with COVID. So we have not gotten back to that discussion, but it's in there, proposed to council as a priority, and certainly something that we view as important to do. That's all I have. Thank you. Oh, Your Honor, can I mention one more thing? We have had a very significant rainfall event. So people, if they're living in areas that are susceptible to flooding, should keep an eye out over these next 24 hours. The rivers areas, especially in the Red Cedar area, will be getting higher up, and people should keep an eye on that and be observant of the high waters, especially not to cross roadways that are covered with water. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is the city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Yaden. All right, now we're on to the business agenda. The first item is an update on state legislative activities related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I will hand that over to Mr. Lahanis.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. So this is an item that we came upon because council wanted the next discussion, which is on the Register of Action. And we thought it would be a good idea to bring our lobbyist, Maureen Watson-Bolger, in from McKelvey & Associates to talk about that issue directly with council and hear council's direction. But being that our lobbyist, and this is sort of an unprecedented time for us in terms of the COVID pandemic hitting the state, hitting the city, and all the financial issues, our lobbyist has been busy connecting us with good information sources and also been working legislatively to try to minimize the impact on municipalities in East Lansing. So if Maureen wanted to, this is Maureen Watson-Bolger, again, our lobbyist. She's worked with the city for probably a decade, I think, at this point, maybe 8 years. If you want us to go through and give us some information about some of the activities you've been doing on our behalf, and that would be helpful. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. As George said, we've been very busy over the last several weeks working through many of the changes at the state level as it impacts the city. Primarily, we've been involved in the discussions related to the executive orders and how they will impact city operations, and getting information back to the city as fast as possible so that you're prepared to move forward and changes that were in place through the executive orders. So that's been the primary issues lately. And then moving forward as the state transitioned to facing the economic challenges as we move through the pandemic, our focus, I think, will be dominated largely by budget. And that's really the area where we're looking right now and have had meetings with the state budget director, the executive office, various legislative leaders to talk about how the state will approach municipal funding through this and what we are able to yet decipher about the federal dollars that Michigan has received and how those might impact the municipal financing issues. So at the moment, largely a communication between the executive office and then transitioning into that real budget focus as we move through the state budget cycle.
Thanks. Any questions for Maureen from council? Okay. And also, I think it's been really helpful for us as city staff. Myself and Jill Felposh, our director, have been on the phone and on these calls that they've convened on our behalf. So I think it's been very useful for us getting more information. So we got to appreciate her efforts on our behalf.
Okay, this was we put this on the business agenda because of the next item, which is 3.2. If anybody has any questions for Ms. Watson-Bolger right now, or you can wait till after 3.2, either one is fine. Okay. The next item is item 3.2. This is consideration of a resolution to remove from the Register of Action records pertaining to any legal action concerning an individual who was acquitted of charges for which they were arrested. Just for purposes of discussion, I'd like to move approval of this. Oh, never mind. Let's just keep going out the way we're doing. George, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is an issue that was raised. The mayor asked me to put this on the agenda, and it involved a couple of different facets. One of the facets significantly was looking for some sort of a legislative fix from the state regarding how these records are retained. The other is a more local issue of how we individually or how we prosecute and how our court handles these records. So we thought it would be useful again to have Maureen here to hear council's direction if you want to direct any sort of legislative activity, how that would work and what you're looking for. And of course, Mr. Yaden is available. I know Mr. Yaden has been having video problems, but he is on the phone. So if he blanks out a video, he should be able to talk on the phone, I think. Is that right, Tom? But I think your video even might have froze up now. But can you hear me, Tom?
That's correct.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Tom may be talking by phone.
Going in and out, though.
Okay, but he's by phone, so he can talk as well. So we thought perhaps it would be useful for Tom sort of to give a framing of the issue and then for Maureen to talk about it from the state legislative approach, if that's reasonable.
That is. There's one thing that I would like to do if it's possible, Mr. Lannis, and you can tell me if it is or not. So sure. The idea for this resolution came from, as many of our great ideas do, East Lansing resident, Nell Kumanich, who tried to call in during the public comment, but was unable to get through to the public comment. Can she speak at this point in the business agenda?
Sure. Do you know if she's in by number or by?
Yes, her number is 7291. That's her last 4 digits.
Yeah, Nicole, can you go to 291?
Yep.
To give Ms. Kumanich a chance to speak.
They've now been unmuted and they can address council.
Ms. Kumanich, you are live.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayor. I am going to pull up the statement that I wrote for this, so I'm not able to see your faces, but I think that's okay. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm sorry it's taking me a little while to stumble through this. Ms. Mayor and members of City Council, my name is Nell Kumanich. I live at 812 Applegate Lane in East Lansing. Thank you for considering this proposed resolution to eliminate, I'm sorry, I just lost my place. Thank you for considering this proposed resolution to eliminate public access to arrest records in certain situations when either charges are dropped against an individual or an individual is not convicted. This issue came to light most prominently at your March 11, 2020 council meeting when the charges were dropped against Mr. Ulimana Gacito. Following that meeting and after further discussion with each of you individually about the issue of continuing maintenance of arrest records, I drafted a proposed resolution for your consideration. That proposed draft had been made publicly available on the agenda for this meeting. The original proposed draft was reviewed by several individuals with much more expertise and understanding of this issue than I, and some modifications were proposed, which I was able to, again, share with each of you individually during the past couple of days. I believe that modified resolution is also part of the agenda as of sometime today. That modified resolution is two-part. The first part is designed for the council to direct the city manager to work with the judges of our East Lansing District Court to remove from any and all records available for public viewing any records pertaining to any law enforcement action, including but not limited to an arrest concerning an individual which did not result in a conviction. The second part is designed for the council to direct the city's lobbyist to develop and support legislation to assure that all law enforcement records pertaining to or identifying an individual are permanently deleted from all publicly accessible sources at any level of record maintenance when an individual was not convicted of a crime. This latter effort is one that might well be made part of work that some legislators have undertaken on the issue of criminal justice reform. It is my understanding that there is bipartisan work on this broader issue taking place in the state Senate, and I'm happy to discuss what I understand further with the city lobbyist offline or online if you want me to. Further, such an effort might become very, very timely as the courts have now been put in a position to move many of their proceedings online, and that may develop even more. Since courtrooms are and have been open to the public under our system of justice, and since putting them online opens them more broadly to the public in a way than probably has been experienced with very many court proceedings at all in our system, confidentiality is going to become increasingly and incredibly important. There will undoubtedly be a great deal of discussion concerning balancing the public's right to know versus an individual's right to privacy as the world of judicial proceedings continues to evolve. I urge you to adopt this resolution in its modified form in the interest of justice for every individual who might experience either of these identified situations. I thank you for your consideration and your work on this important issue, and thank you for the time to speak. I'm done.
Thank you, Nell. And now we will go to Ms. Watson-Bolger, or Mr. Yaden, I think is where you wanted to go first, Mr. Lannis? Okay, Mr. Yaden.
That sounds, yeah, to sort of frame the issue.
Yep. Uh-oh.
Yeah, the issue, I think, to boil it down a little clearer, is that the East Lansing Police Department records are, in fact, sealed if there is an acquittal or if charges are dismissed. The issue arises because the court system still leaves their records available online, so someone can plug in someone's name and their register of actions will come up, and that will show that they were in fact once charged with an offense or offenses, and then I think it'll also show the dispositions of those, but it does show a charge. The fingerprint statute currently requires that if someone isn't convicted of an offense that they're charged with, it requires the destruction of their fingerprints and their arrest card. And then we've interpreted that statute to also mean their police report is non-public. So the police department end of things is pretty well taken care of. It's the court end of things that become an issue.
Thank you. Ms. Watson-Bolger?
Yes, so in initial discussions around this issue, I think it is possible to pursue a state legislative change that could create a new statutory exemption or a way to eliminate these records, but it does require a full statutory change in order to do that. We've had some initial conversations with Ms. Evans with the court. And I would recommend that we do further research into this issue to prepare that type of a statutory draft in coordination with the city attorney. I believe that this is an area where there has been some pretty strong bipartisan support at the state level. It's one of the areas that the legislature and the executive office have worked very well together and have put through a number of criminal justice reforms this year. Even. I believe this is an area where we could see further work, although I would advise that while there's been significant legislation passed, it's also an area where I think there is some fatigue at the state level, that they've worked through a number of these issues and some may feel that they've done enough. But I do think that this is an area where we have a possibility to move forward if that's the city's direction. And then I guess my only other advice here would be the timing of the initiative. Recognizing that largely the state is entering into a significant recession, and we've all read the news about what this means for the budget, and lawmakers and the governor will have to grapple with, significant cuts to the budget, and I think that will largely dominate the legislative agenda, both in the short term and somewhat in the long term for the remainder of this year. So I think timing will be key for us. We've heard from a number of state leaders through the series of forums. As George mentioned, we've had a number of state leaders join us for forums to discuss the legislative agenda, what they're doing forward, and most of them have said their appetite for items that are not either state budget or COVID related are going to be somewhat limited, just because that will dominate what is going on. So I think this is an area where we can possibly move forward if that's the city's direction, and look forward to further developing the details of such a proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I had a miscommunication earlier today, so it's going to be, you're going to have to follow this very closely to see exactly what the resolution was. So if everybody would go to page 3 of the attachment on the agenda that starts with, please see below this original to find suggested modifications. Is everybody on council there?
Yes,
Yes, but you're breaking up just a little
Shake your
bit.
head.
you're
Yes.
breaking up. So here, why don't I do this?
Okay,
There's a version 2, and
Oh,
I'll move that
shoot.
we adopt this
All
version
right.
2 and ask that the staff put it into a regular resolution form. That's our intention, but this is the language that will be in there. That's my motion.
I will second that.
All right, I do have something I want to say about it, if that's
Second
okay.
that motion. Any Councilmember Meadows?
Okay, yeah, I think that Maureen is correct. that,
Hang
you know,
on,
this-
hang on.
We okay?
Uh-oh.
So
We might have lost Ruth.
Not sure what's going on there, so
It's okay. Councilmember Meadows, go ahead. Well,
I think Maureen is right that this is more likely a lame duck issue. In other words, something that we could get introduced and possibly get passed during lame duck, particularly if it's a bipartisan approach. So I would hope that we would approach some Republican legislators to co-sponsor or sponsor this legislation as we go forward. And from my part, if there's anything I can do to help, I'm happy to do that.
All right, I would
Mark,
second
was
that.
that-
Oh, good.
Should we add that for a resolution for adoption on a consent agenda next week?
No, I think
that what you'd
we're
like?
adopting it tonight. It's
You're
just
passing
going
it
to
now.
be put
Passing
into
it
a
now.
regular form. That's all.
I got it. Okay, gotcha.
There was a motion by Councilmember Meadows and a second by Mayor Byer. Is there any more discussion on this item? All right, seeing none.
Mayor-
All those in favor of passing this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, that resolution is passed. Maureen, I would just say, if there is a difference, please feel free to reach out to Councilmember Meadows, myself, the mayor, and I'm sure Nell, who's still listening, would be more than happy to assist. I think we all, I haven't spoken to Councilmember Gregg or Babcock, but I'm sure they have an understanding of this issue as well, and we're all happy to relay intentions. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is 3.3, consideration of the appropriate ordinances necessary to allow expansion of restaurant outdoor seating. And that item is for our city attorney.
So I actually think it might be Tom Fehrenbach
Oh,
might
my
kick
bad.
us off with that one.
Okay,
Mayor Pro
Yeah,
Tem.
I'll be
Thank
happy
you.
to kick us off.
yep,
A different
Thank you.
time.
So as the council is
different Tom.
Yep. So as the council is aware, staff has been exploring concepts and programs to support the return of businesses with anticipated rules in place to keep people safe, such as social distancing, et cetera. We think it's likely that restaurants will need to reduce occupancy limits to allow for the distancing. And we've been investigating options to expand dining areas to outside. Ultimately, we'll be looking at private locations like patios, public right-of-way license expansions and fee reductions, et cetera. Tonight, though, we have an initial concept which really focuses on public spaces. Essentially, the concept is to cordon off the public right-of-way and allow the conversion into an open-air dining area. We've been working with the Department of Public Works on Albert Avenue as an initial area and envision that our plan could be implemented in the near term. Included in your packet is an overview of the concept, which would include concrete barriers creating a dining area with tables spaced at distance and a street closure surrounding it to create more of a pedestrian promenade. I think the initial concept is to provide an enclosure which would be installed for a couple months, allowing patrons of downtown to visit a local restaurant, get takeout, then have the option to enjoy it in a socially distanced community setting. In discussions with the DDA and others, there was a sense that allowing alcohol to be consumed in the dining area adds to the attractiveness of the idea. Although the actual service of alcohol in the area will take some additional research and consideration. Allowing the consumption of packaged alcohol purchased from local restaurants does appear to be under the purview of the City Council. As such, the city attorney and staff have drafted some ordinance language that's attached in your packet that would create the option of open air dining areas in public areas and establish a framework for permitting alcohol to be consumed. The main thrust of the ordinance language is that there would be 3 areas available for consideration. Albert near the new Center City project, Lot 11, Bailey Lot, and an area just off of Valley Court, just south of Valley Court Park on actual Valley Court. It would be allowable under this ordinance from June 1st to August 15th, from hours of operation of 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Alcohol would be allowed within the barricaded entrance if purchased from a licensed restaurant near the open air dining area with a food order. If the council wants to move forward, we suggest you provide any feedback you have tonight, and staff can bring forward a formal ordinance, which can be set at next week for June 9th consideration. That would allow us for time for the public and the DDA to consider it and give their input to the council for consideration. One final note, we do expect there to be some costs associated with the cleanliness and other factors we're exploring those, currently getting quotes, et cetera. But the concept of cost should be on our radar as we explore this concept. I know the city attorney is on the line and be happy to take any questions that you have. Would love to hear sort of your thoughts. And I also have Mr. House available to talk through kind of the public space piece of it as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fehrenbach. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for stepping in when my Wi-Fi decided to take a little break. Mr. Meadows.
I think we should move forward as quickly as possible on this. So I'm supportive of the idea of having an ordinance on the agenda on the 26th so that we can set a public hearing and maybe get this thing done in early June and up and going. I think we really need to do this to support our downtown businesses. There are 3 areas here, all of which I think will be attractive to individuals coming downtown to spend time. And the whole idea of sort of the European approach of having crowds of people in a downtown area on every evening will be facilitated by this type of approach. So I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Yeah, so 2 things on this. One, I'm really, really happy with the expansion of the areas. I know that was a discussion at the DDA Public Policy Committee that we had a fairly long discussion on, where we were talking about different areas within the city that this can be utilized, just because obviously that Albert area is a central part of our downtown, but there are businesses that locate in other areas that might benefit for having places that are closer by. So my next thing is actually Councilmember Gregg and I got sent a bill that I think was either in draft form or just gotten introduced from Representative Mike Weber that might allow for that extra amount of alcohol in public spaces that we were talking about. I can send that along. He sent it today, so I didn't get much chance to look over the specifics of it, but it did look to accomplish that goal, so I might send it along to town meeting. My next question is, can we pass this tonight if we're all on board with it, like as it is?
I think it has to be introduced. Go ahead, Tom.
The charter requires that it be introduced and adopted at separate meetings, and it's not quite in ordinance form yet, so it needs to be polished a little bit first.
Okay.
I think realistically, we're waiting for the governor to give us the order that we can be out in the street. So even if that comes like June 1st, let's say hypothetically, we could put the barriers out, start putting tables out, get the whole thing set up, and people could be enjoying food at that point. And then it'd literally be a week later that council would take your action, and then the alcohol component would be there on the 9th. So right. It kind of eases us into it in a way and gets us to get the setup all right, which I think is pretty reasonable. It doesn't just start it all in one day and there's everything at once. So I do think we can kind of ease into it June 1 if we're permitted to under the governor's order, potentially without the alcohol.
Okay. And then my final question is, so when you say accompanying food order, the language here just says accompanying food order. So does that mean like, somebody can get fries, right? And then they can, because I am all for making sure that, people are drinking responsibly, eating and whatever, but I do imagine there's going to be some amount of people that just want to be outside and like maybe get a beer with, their families and stuff. And I want to still be able to like allow for that. So,
And I actually agree with that, George. I don't want to be back in the how much food and how much beer are they drinking business. Yeah. It took us a long time to get out of that.
That's actually the idea. Yeah. The idea was to try to encourage people to have it where they're eating and drinking as well to support the restaurants. But Mr. Yaden had discussed that. We purposely left it vague because you could have an order of fries and 3 people could enjoy a beer. So there isn't a limit. There isn't 50-50. There isn't a dollar amount. You could get an appetizer and people at the table have drinks. So I think the idea was that they're actually eating as well, but that's up to council as well. Trying to encourage people to eat, enjoy the downtown restaurants and the alcohol at the same time, but that's up to council.
Councilmember Stevens.
So my preference would be that we get rid of that clause, although I am supportive of the idea overall. I agree with the mayor. I don't want to head back down that route. So
I'd like to hear from the other council members on this particular issue. What do you think about just opening it up, letting the restaurants serve food and when we can alcohol, but not requiring people to order food? Councilmember Gregg.
Well, this is kind of giving me flashbacks to several other discussions that we've had about public consumption of alcohol. I remember festivals wanting to have beer tents, and then more recently than that, I was tangentially involved with discussions with the Chamber of Commerce about their pub crawl, grub crawl. And we had charter language that really restricted that, which I think kind of goes along with this culture of policing student behavior by making a lot of rules about it. And I feel like in general, we've kind of outgrown that, and that we're limiting ourselves by continuing to have sort of a draconian view of alcohol consumption, especially when we're trying to encourage adult entertainment downtown. So I'm, not in favor of like drunken brawls or anything, but I think to me, this is a step in the right direction of recognizing that adults like to socially imbibe alcohol, and that we have a downtown where we would like adults to socially recreate. So in addition to being in support of this, I also would like to use this as a step towards addressing our charter problem that is limiting the types of entertainment we can have downtown.
Thank you. So from what I understand, that you wouldn't want to have a requirement that they also eat. Is that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Babcock?
Just two issues. Does liquor control have anything to say on this? I mean, what we operate within the framework of liquor control rules because it's a highly regulated entity, and I'd just be interested in knowing what they have to say. Secondly, just a flashback to my public defender days. When someone is in a sobriety court program, they are not allowed to go anywhere that alcohol is sold by the glass, usually without prior permission of the judge. And Judge Allen and Mason is especially strict on this point. Just something to keep in mind is that when alcohol is being consumed in a public place, there are people who cannot go to that place anymore for any reason whatsoever. So one of my classics was I had a client who went to the Green Door in Lansing, which is known for its music, was eating a hamburger, listening to music, was violated because they sell alcohol by the glass for open consumption. Does not affect a lot of people, but it's just worth keeping in mind. Mostly, I just would be interested in what liquor control has to say about opening it up and sales without food sales. I just don't know what the licenses require. But if it's licensed to be okay, that's fine. Just recognize that we are going to be prohibiting some people from participating in events downtown.
Thank you, Councilmember Babcock. I did not know that. Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a concern with regard to that. As I understand the thing that we've been presented tonight, we are allowing our restaurants, our bars and restaurants to expand to the public sidewalk and add more seating in that location. What we're really talking about when we talk about when you buy food, you can get some beer and also sit at a picnic table in the middle of Albert is a whole different thing. So we aren't really, normally we'd be saying that if you're in a space that is actually under control by a licensed establishment, you don't have to buy food in order to drink. And that will still be the case in the downtown area on the sidewalk areas where we have expanded patio usage. If we're going out into the street, you have to go get your food from somebody and you're buying some beer and taking it with you. I mean, that's the only way to actually function that. So I'm not clear on what what we're proposing at this point in time, because I think that what this does is it expands the opportunities for the retail establishments, those establishments that sell food and beverages. You could even go to the party store and get a 6-pack of beer and go sit at a picnic table if you wanted to, because you'd be buying something in the downtown and using the public space. I don't think we need to just eliminate the buy food and then you can get some booze at the same time and carry it out there. And I also have the same question that Councilmember Babcock has, and I know I've indicated this to George too, that I just want to make sure that the MLCC is also okay with the way we're approaching this, and that we don't have issues involving our SUPs that would put some of our establishments in violation of the SUPs. So those are my only concerns with regard to it. But I think we can deal with all those concerns, and maybe nobody else cares about those, so we can move even faster. But I think we can get the picnic tables out there, allow bars to move on the sidewalks without solving those little problems first. I think we can wait and decide what exactly can be done in the street bed, which is what we're really talking about here.
Agreed.
Oh, sorry, who was that? Councilmember Babcock?
Yes, agreed.
Okay. I, on the other hand, would like to give some clear direction to Mr. Lahanas. I guess we can finish it up with just amendments to this, but I think we have at least 3 council people who don't want to require food. And to your point, Mr. Meadows, what somebody could do is they could go to the party store and buy a 6-pack and sit down and drink it. They don't have to buy food. They could also go to Ellis Teco and buy a Corona and go sit at a picnic table and drink it without buying any food. I just don't want to require them buying food, not because I don't want them to eat food, but because I don't want to police whether they're eating food. I don't want Ellis Teco to have to say, you can't buy that beer unless you also buy food. Because when I'm in Ellis Teco, I can just buy the beer. So I don't know why I would tell them that they have to also buy food. I think it's just adding complexity. I don't think it's going to be in a place where, given the time limits we have, that it's going to be a frenzy of drunken people. That's the direction I think I and Councilmember Gregg and Mayor Pro Tem Stevens have given to Mr. Lahanas. Councilmember Babcock.
Just one thought, but under Liquor Control Commission rules, I don't think they're allowed to sell it by the glass to leave the premises.
Okay, and
So
that's
why we need more
gotcha.
guidance.
No, I think that I could speak for the 3 of the people I just spoke for, that we don't want to break any laws. So it has to be something that the Liquor Commission is good with, that we can do. Whatever we can do that minimizes directing people what they have to do, that's what we want to do, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay.
And also one other thing I want to mention, I'd like to mention that we didn't intend that this is supposed to come from a licensed restaurant only. So
Okay.
if you were to go buy a case at CVS or somewhere, you couldn't go sit at the tables and drink. The idea was just to be able to have, if you think of it as a food court for the restaurants, like a mall
Right.
food court, except in a cooler location. So you buy from the restaurant, food or not food is up to council. You take your drink, you walk to the tables. They're not serving you there. You're bringing it yourself and just sitting at the tables that we provide to you, and you can do that legally is the goal. But we have to get to that issue that you mentioned about, we know with an SDM, a carry away license, you can carry away alcohol. But the point is a good one for these couple of places that don't have that. Does Liquor Control Commission allow you to have that in the street? We have to get to that issue. And so we can take the food part out, and then council can decide next week how you want to handle that.
Right, but I think we need to make sure it's legal to do so.
Just one question.
Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. How on earth will we know whether, okay, a case is pretty obvious, but how on earth will we know whether a bottle of wine came from one of our licensed establishments, a conventional bar restaurant, versus CVS? I mean, presumably you can buy the same.
We can ask them for a receipt. I don't see policing it to that level, but we certainly could say, do you have a receipt? Did you purchase it at the restaurant?
Okay.
we're trying to avoid the problem of, 50 people show up and they bring cases of beer and they spread out on all the tables and it's a big beer fest, when the idea is to support people purchasing food and alcohol from the restaurants and people feeling safe going down to the beginning. So we're trying to ease people into the idea of getting back to the restaurants and supporting the restaurants. So that really is the idea. People can always take beer or wine out from the other store, the takeaway stores like CVS or 7-Eleven. But this is specifically to try to help the restaurants with that food court type style model, and also doing something that's easy enough that we can just quickly roll it out, because people are looking to try to support quickly here and get people back utilizing those businesses. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Babcock.
I just think we need to prepare ourselves for the contingency. This is East Lansing. We've all been there, and at least in past decades, if not currently. We need to prepare ourselves for the contingency that there'll be some extracurricular use of alcohol that may not accompany food purchases or restaurant purchases. So thanks.
Thank you.
One of the things we also did to try to address that was to have the 2-hour time limit. We're trying to encourage tables to turn over so you don't plop there all day and then not let other customers use it, but also that it's not supposed to be an all-day tailgate party. It's supposed to be to facilitate the restaurant usage. So that's a concern we have. We're just trying to balance that, but I understand your concern.
So, City Mr. Lahanis, I don't think you have to worry about a tailgate. We don't have any sports.
Tailgate-like activity. You just need a parking lot for a tailgate these days. You don't need any sports.
Okay. Thank you very much for working so quickly on this, Mr. Lahanis. I know that Mr. Stevens had this idea, the DDA had this idea, everybody brought you this idea, and you got right to work on it and came up with a structure that works. Thank you to the DDA for all its work on this too. I think they had a lot of
Shannon Draheim as well for pushing me and Peter Dewan to look into it as well.
Right. So I think this will be great for the city, and who knows, it might be something that we do in non-COVID times too, just because it's so popular.
That I do not disagree with.
Okay. So it is 8:03. We are going to the last agenda item, 3.4. This is going to be a longer item. So I asked Mr. Lahanis if we could take a 5-minute break. Let's just make it a 7-minute break and come back at 8:10. Is that okay? Shaking your heads? Okay. I'll see everybody at 8:10. Yep. Okay. Are we back? Hang on. There we go. All right, the meeting is back in session. And we are on our last item on the agenda, Mr. Lahanas.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So this is our last session on the budget. We obviously have next week where council will be approving the budget. And if you have more discussion at that point, of course, we'd be happy to provide any information you need. So part of the packet that we have for you is the questions to council's, answers to council's questions that we have that as a part of the packet. We also have all of the directors available for this discussion as we had last week. If council has any questions at the conclusion of the presentations, we're presenting on parking and on public works. Certainly, any topic is certainly fair game, and we can try to answer those questions for you immediately. I also want to just talk briefly about the sort of overall budget picture. We mentioned last week the significant concern about state share revenue and how in a number of areas, besides just state share revenue, Public Act 289, there's also areas where the city is receiving a lot less funding. I mean, a lot less revenue, and that's going to be particularly in Parks and Rec, which we talked about last week. And then we're coming to talk now about parking. And these are two areas where we're going to have significant challenges. Obviously, just like many businesses, because customers are not there, we don't have paying customers at this point. So as we look at the challenges, we've been talking internally about doing things to control costs. One of the things we mentioned was prioritizing capital projects, and we'll be looking at that further and bringing council a list of prioritized capital projects, but also looking at reductions in staff. So there's a program that the city wants to avail ourselves of, which is Michigan's Work Share program, which gives the city an opportunity to retain employees on our books. So employees would still be working for us, but they would also have a reduction in hours, and then those employees would be eligible for unemployment during that period. The idea would be to obviously save on staff costs during that time, but also to continue the service at a level that hopefully would not be too negatively impactful on our residents. So you can envision, as we are moving back into the workplace, hopefully June 1st, that for June and July, we would have a situation where we would have a reduction in staff, and perhaps some of our outward-facing departments where the customers would be coming would have a somewhat modest reduction in hours, potentially maybe 4 days a week we would be open at City Hall, you can imagine. And then we would have staff in the building that are on a reduced schedule, perhaps 50%. This would allow us to do a number of things, obviously save money, which is a very significant item at this point, but also to provide for greater social distancing because we have fewer staff in the building, and also provide a redundancy because if the staff who are in the building are sick, there's a COVID incident in the workplace, we can then have that redundancy where there are additional staff people who aren't in the workplace who could then come back in and backfill. So I think it does a number of things for us. So what we'd like to do is next week bring you a resolution for council to consider where we would request a reduction as we're opening in June and July, potentially a reduction in hours of operation, modest reduction, not a significant one, and also that we would have fewer hours of work for our employees, but they would actually be made whole in terms of unemployment and the Federal CARES Act. So the idea is to save the city of East Lansing money, have the employees working less, but also provide a softer landing for our employees during that period. So that's our thought. If anyone had any questions on that specifically, I'd be happy to answer. Did you want to pick that, Mayor, or should I just?
Nope, go ahead.
So I think Aaron had his hand up first, and then Councilmember Babcock.
So a couple of things. So this would allow then for employees to say work 2 days a week in person, right? And have other employees in a different department work 2 days a week so as to maintain a little bit more distance between each other and make sure that we're easing into being in confined spaces together. Is that correct? For some.
Yeah, that's part of the idea. Yep. Yeah, so what we had originally thought before falling upon this idea was more formally was that we would simply have a reserve of employees who were telecommuting or not in the workplace.
Sure.
So that perhaps a third of the workforce wouldn't be there if there was if someone came in and was sick, found out to be sick afterwards, and we had to quarantine people or have them at home. we didn't want to lose the entire department. So this actually would meet that need while also saving money for the city of East Lansing. So both of those things.
That's great. And I just want to mention this. So, I talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, and George and I have discussed this. I think that if anything, the past month and a half or so has taught us that, and shout out to our great IT department for managing a lot of this stuff and working through probably a lot of issues within departments, but that folks have been maybe not to the full capacity, but been able to do their jobs remotely. And that for the safety of our employees, it might be good to maintain some level of distance and make sure that people can either stay at home, work from home, or be able to rotate out when necessary. My next kind of question is, run me through what it would be like for an employee. So you're an employee, you're told you're going to be working 20 hours. So do they have to apply for the unemployment? What's their paycheck going to look like? Is it going to be one from the state, one from the city? Is it going to be a stipend? So run me through what that would be like.
So my understanding is that Michigan Works Share Program, the city of East Lansing, the employer actually applies on behalf of the employees as a group. So there isn't that much of a process that involves the employee. We're doing most of it, and it doesn't require that ongoing certification by week. So I think that our HR would handle it more as a centralized activity, and then the employees, I still believe, would be getting a separate check from unemployment. That part would not be through the city. So they would get a check for the hours in which they actually worked for the city. If it was a 50% reduction, they'd get paid for 20 hours, say, and then unemployment would be paying the state portion unemployment plus the federal subsidy for that, making the employee essentially whole. Obviously, we can't say exactly whole. Depending on their wage, they might make a little bit less, they might make about the same, or they might make a little bit more during that period. But obviously, the intent for us is not really to change their pay, but obviously to have the savings and have the social distancing opportunity for our employees.
What about benefits?
So benefits would have to remain intact, and I think that's obviously a great thing. You wouldn't want someone to be without their health insurance, so health, dental, and benefits would stay intact during that period, provided by the employer.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Babcock?
Thank you. A question, I know there's federal and state money behind this. Is this money alone, or is it just given straight to the city, or is it passed through directly to the employees?
So what would happen if we did our own layoff, if we did not use the structure of the Michigan Work Share Program? We would be on the hook for the unemployment of the state portion. So the state portion would be paid by the city because we self-insure for this. So we would just pay it as we go. So if the employees were laid off, let's just say we did 100% layoff of an employee, which we're not talking about here, but if we did, and the employee made like 30% of their wage, the city would be on the hook for that for, I believe, about a period of 6 months. Under this situation, the state actually, my understanding is the state actually picks up the unemployment portion, and then the federal government pays their portion. It's not a loan, it's just paid for by the state. And the idea is to encourage employers to retain employees and shoulder part of that burden so that you're not fully letting people go. We're still keeping them half-time employed. Yes.
Okay, and that brings me to my second part of the question. If we don't go through with this, what other scenarios do you see? There's flat out layoff, or?
So I think that that's a possibility that we would try to avoid. But, the danger is as you wait longer and longer into a fiscal challenge, my view of these fiscal challenges is you have to act early. The longer you wait, the longer you delay, the worse situations get. And then the more drastic action you need to take to solve problems. So taking this action early on, like we took the action with the contingent employees, I think it's a responsible thing to do. I wouldn't want to say that it would certainly mean that we would be laying people off in the future, but I think it certainly creates a higher likelihood that that would be necessary in the future if we didn't take this action now.
One last question.
Yes, sure.
Any idea whether there'll be a lag for employees in the unemployment paycheck process? I mean, if I were an employee, I'd be like, okay, great, but am I going to get half a paycheck and then have to wait considerably until the state acts? Maybe that's something to put on our radar as we move forward.
Yeah, we can look into that. I understand that right now there has been a lag because of the overload of unemployment, that people were waiting up to 2 to 3 weeks to get their check. But if we have a lag in terms of our pay, because we pay people about a week after, we have a biweekly period and we pay people a week later. So if we start the process immediately, hopefully there would be a very short lag time when they would start getting unemployment as well. I'm not sure if Jill or Shelley are on the line and can answer that question in terms of a lag, and in terms of if we're the ones providing the information, if that helps speed that up. Is that any information that Jill or Shelley have? Nicole, can you pick on Shelley there? Oh, there's Jill.
I can jump in real quick. My understanding from the little bit of research I've seen is we would be responsible to certify for our employees on a biweekly basis. And it says that they should receive their money within 2 to 3 business days after we certify. So it should be a pretty quick turnaround for our employees.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Lahanas, do you know of other
Yes.
cities that are doing this?
Yeah, Jill, we had talked about this as well. I believe the city of Kalamazoo and the city of Lansing are using, and the state of Michigan are also using this program. But do you know of any others, or is that the case, Jill?
Yeah, I can only confirm. I saw city of Kalamazoo and the state of Michigan. I'm not sure about the city of Lansing. I know they're doing something, but I'm not sure if it's the work share program or some kind of voluntary furlough type of program.
I spoke to the mayor of Lansing earlier today, and he informed me that they were looking into it, and that it was something that they're exploring fairly thoroughly.
Yeah. So any other questions on that? Because, go ahead, sorry. Any other questions on that before we jump into parking? And I would turn it over to Mr. Fehrenbach. Obviously, if you come up with questions, we're all here. I'm here, so we can go back to this item or go back to any other items. So we're not closing that section off. But with that, Tom, did you want to start off on parking for us?
Yes, thank you. And I see Mr. Sharrow has joined us via video as well. So as Mr. Lahanas mentioned, similar to many of our downtown businesses, our parking enterprise has experienced significant challenges due to COVID and the necessary response. As council is aware, the gates are currently up and we're not charging for hourly parking, and revenues are significantly reduced. Our projections for fiscal year 20 won't be realized, and fiscal year 21 is likely to require significant adjustment as well. I'll go over briefly tonight where we kind of thought we would be for fiscal year 21, which is the current budget that is in front of the council for consideration. Then I'll talk about some of the areas of current concern due to the COVID and some of our initial thoughts on how to respond, and also look for council guidance on how best to manage the structural realities of our own budget, while also keeping in mind that parking will likely be an important tool to help our business district recover from the effects of COVID. Go ahead and Ms. Bartel, if you want to go to the next slide. So essentially this is where, we had worked up until March preparing for the fiscal year 21 budget. We were feeling very confident. Things were starting to look rather well. We were projecting some increases. We had talked with the parking task force at length about several ideas, including increasing the grace period from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. And we were looking at some modest rate increases, and also looking to implement a rate increase that had been delayed for a bit. You can move to the next slide, please. We were also budgeting for some modest increases in personnel services, mainly related to some cost of living increases and some a raise for our ambassadors to try to help get some continuity with those folks. We were continuing to fund our homeless outreach position, which we feel has been successful.
And then we were also planning some significant capital projects, as well as funding some significant debt service through directly and also through the building authority. So you can go on to the next one. So unfortunately, we have a lot of concerns, mainly due to the COVID situation. As I mentioned, we have very limited revenue while the gates are down. That relates to hourly parkers, but also permit parkers, due to the fact that several people have left the area, students, they're returning to their permanent residences, and then others have realized that they can park in the lower levels and no longer need to pay for the permit upstairs. In terms of lots of uncertainty in terms of when we return and how to project for customer demand and revenues at that point. And meanwhile, we have significant structural costs that remain, including debt service, the technology, utility payments, elevator services, maintenance, staffing, et cetera. So you can go to the next one. So in terms of our initial response considerations, I think, as the city manager mentioned, deferring, the capital projects, deferring, things like our parking master plan update, deferring some back office software integrations that we had planned that would help our efficiency. We do have one individual who's planning to retire very soon, so obviously we'd hold off on replacing that. And then I think we need to look at things like, the agreement that we have with MSU regarding Scene Metro Space, where we pay some of those costs. We might want to rethink some of those types of agreements. In terms of kind of what we do as a standard business support, obviously we probably will want to talk about not having the rate increases to both the meters and the permits, and then we continue to have our current programs, the validation, the use of the loading zone meters, which I think we need to make sure we get the word out a little bit better on. And then as well as the touchless passport parking mobile payments, I think that may become more popular as we enter kind of the recovery phase. And then some of the things that, we really need guidance on would be how to best approach kind of the support beyond our kind of normal programs, to really look at parking as one of the support mechanisms to get our business district back. And obviously the challenge there is that we do have these significant structural costs and the budget realities that we need to deal with. And we need to kind of balance those two forces. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. Be happy to take any of the questions that you have. And then again, Mr. Sharrow's here as well, who has a keen sense of all the details.
Mr. Meadows.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to compliment you on the way this has been presented and the very, I thought, well thought out post-COVID things that we need to do as we go forward. I don't know that we're going to be able to estimate the total problem that we may have with the parking system because we aren't even going to know at this point in time or at the time that we adopt our budget as to when the governor is going to reopen everything up, and it could be months. But the whole idea of deferring these matters to a future date because of this issue, I think you've done a great job of putting this together. So my compliments to you.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yeah, I just want to second what what Councilmember Meadows said. I know that we're not going to have a full grasp of the effect of all these things, but I do think that especially, while we're going through this budget, we're not really sure about a lot of things. This does give us kind of a good perspective of where the priorities are and what we could expect to see as possible responses after we know a little bit more. So thanks.
In terms of direction, Mr. Lahanis and Mr. Fehrenbach, I want to from my perspective, err on the side of keeping parking free for longer so that we can stimulate businesses. I mean, if we could say we've got this new amenity downtown where people can get food instead of picnic tables and not worry about paying for parking during that time. I think those two things go together, and I know it just sets us back a little further, but I mean, I hate to say we're throwing up our hands anyway. We could just throw them up a little higher. I just think it's something that we don't want people to have to worry about parking, at least as we're trying to get the restaurants and businesses open again.
So what we tried to do is we're already discussing the fact that if June 1, we start with the tables in the downtown, if we're allowed to open, and then at least go through the month of June and not start charging for parking through the month of June to give people a chance to get back and coming down and in the habit of coming down, and then look at it in July and thinking about July 1, but that's for discussion. So that's what we've been discussing internally, if council supports that.
Okay,
I do
Councilmember
indeed
Gregg.
support.
Councilmember Gregg?
I definitely through June, but I don't think that's going to be long enough to get downtown on its feet. I am currently operating downtown, and even with the gates up on the parking garage, my customers are still complaining about parking. So, and they're mostly coming in for short visits because it's curbside at the moment. So,
because they don't.
We have got a huge barrier with our parking. There is just a general resistance and resentment towards the parking structures, and especially during this recovery period, we've got to remove that barrier to business, and I don't think it can go through June. I mean, I'd like to say August. I know we're hemorrhaging money, and August is a long time, but I've got a front row seat for just how bad it is downtown, and it's pretty bad. So.
Also, Councilmember Gregg, I think that if we do June and July, say, and then look at August, or do June and then look at July and end up doing July, it will bring people into the ramps and they will see that it doesn't kill them. So it might be.
So you would think so, but there's a real resistance towards those even when they're free. I would hope that a period of free, especially when there's interesting things going downtown that would draw people in, like outdoor dining, I hope that we can erode that resistance to the ramps, but honestly, even with this free period, my eternal optimism is starting to flag. I have to say people really hate those things. So we've got a big barrier to get people to engage with their downtown businesses. So.
And
anyway,
that's it.
That's sorry.
It's a philosophical thing, but you can't really have a city with flat lots. You just can't. It's too expensive.
I agree, and they're ecologically terrible. But it's a huge barrier to service downtown. So,
Councilmember Babcock, and then Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Just one thought. I mean, ramps are hated for a reason, and if you've got a stroller, or particularly if you use a wheelchair, those things are lethal. As vehicles get higher, the line of sight changes. So I have a sister who uses a wheelchair, and I guarantee you rolling a wheelchair through even handicapper spaces in a ramp is a life-threatening experience. So I have developed an aversion to ramps because of that, having seen that happen. I agree, we can't have a city without parking going vertical, but it's not as simplistic a rejection as it might seem.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm open to having the conversation around furthering and continuing beyond June. I'll say to the city manager, I am supportive of that action being taken at this point. And I'm very open to having the conversation about continuing that once we can assess costs for it after the fact.
Okay, Councilmember Meadows.
I just want to second what the Mayor Pro Tem just said. I think let's just do the end of June right now, assess the cost, because we'll have a better feel for exactly what's happening there, and we can make a better decision about what we do going forward at that time.
Could I just, I got that direction. I appreciate that direction. in defense of parking ramps, if people give a shot and park in our new parking ramp, the lighting, the openness, the cleanliness, I think the safety built in with the windows and the staircases and all, security is built into the design of these new ones. And I just think that if they give it a shot, it's a really nice experience, especially in the winter. You don't got to brush the snow off your car. You're not trudging through muck. I do think that if people give a shot to our parking ramps, the way they're maintained, especially the new ones, it's a nice experience. So anyway, just in defense of the parking structure, I know there are people who want a sea of flat parking in front of it, but I do think our structures are pretty nice.
Councilmember Greg?
That was unusually negative for me. I just want to say that I also like our parking garages, and I park in one every day and enjoy it, and definitely appreciate not having to scrape snow.
I just don't want to hurt Caleb's feelings because he's going to be upset.
I realized that was, I feel like I'm like the sunny council member, and that was really negative for me. But, it's, take that as a small business owner that's trying to adapt to post-COVID, and it's stressful. But I really think we cannot minimize the trouble.
No, and recognizing the issue in the first place is the important thing. So
no offense to you, Caleb, or your parking garages, they're lovely. So
I think we should change it. We should have a new East Lansing ad. It's not safe to get on a cruise ship, but come to our parking ramps instead.
There you go. That's perfect.
Right. Go ahead, Mr. Lahanas.
So anything else from parking? Any other answers from Tom or Caleb? Or any more questions for these gentlemen before we switch?
Councilmember Stevens.
Great. Are we still, we're talking about free parking in the months of June, July, August, but we've put off that 5 minutes to 15 minutes of until this point. And I know that was the considerations before COVID. That was the point that it was mentioned in this PowerPoint. I'd just like to say I'm still very supportive of doing that in the future, regardless of how long a free parking period is. I'd want to see that increase from 5 minutes to 15 minutes.
Or half an hour.
Or further, but at least to what is the level. I don't want that to be part of the conversation of something that we do not consider because of COVID. So that is my...
So make sure you bring this back to us when we get through the free period, Mr. Lahanas.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that our direction is that we're continuing that grace period, the expansion of the grace period is something that's built into our operations at this point, right, Caleb and Tom?
It's currently the 5 minutes. We were proposing with this budget that Parking Task Force had supported increasing the 5 minute grace period to 15 minutes. So we were going to bring that to council during these discussions. Obviously, things have drastically changed, so we will have to discuss that more in the future after, like you said, after the free parking timeframe.
Yeah, I still just wanted to answer that or ask that question, so it was still in the mix, but I appreciate the answer.
So just to reiterate, that is part of this current fiscal year 21 budget that's in front of the council for consideration. Also in front of you is the fee increases, and that's one area where, if there's consensus, I think that's one area where it makes sense for us to pull those out prior to next week, so we can discuss those at a later time.
Does anybody disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree at all.
Okay, there's your direction, Mr. Fehrenbach.
Caleb, you have a visitor.
Go off to the side here, thanks.
So, and also we got council's direction that for June, we will plan to have the gates open as well.
Okay.
And we'll come back for discussion.
Okay.
So is that all from Tom and Caleb? Then we're good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next is Scott House, presenting on a number of topics. There you are, Scott. We see you.
Good evening. All right. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So this is kind of apropos talking public works budget during National Public Works Week. So as you see, this front slide, just some photos of everyone in the team and all the good things they do, from maintaining infrastructure, building infrastructure, inspecting it, and customer service. And also, this also has some COVID slants on here. Some good news. We had Joy Ketchum, who sewed over 80 masks for the team. We receive fan mail from people working during this environment and their positive energy and all that continued service. So going to slide 2, starting first at the Major Street Fund. So the Major Street Fund is revenue received from Act 51. And the yellow column discusses what's happening in 21. As you can see, what our services are, we maintain the 24 miles of major streets, the MDOT trunk lines, the bridges, and 55 signals. And this is all those services that make East Lansing a pleasant city to drive through in the winter and in the fall, with superior winter maintenance, street leaf removal, crack sealing, and then the engineering team that inspects projects and controls the constructions. Now, the key changes here, fiscal year 21 is our last year of revenue increase under statutory Act 51. So several years ago, that was an increase. So from the future years, we're going to see that level out. And also in 21, we're projecting to use $100,000 in income tax. And so we look at what the projects are, what we have programmed. So we have a Abbott Road federal aid project from Saginaw to Lake Lansing, and that would be a pavement replacement project. And we're studying the feasibility for bike lanes along that. And also we have Collingwood, which would be a crush and shape from Ann to Bertram, and also would involve water. And then we have Division and Charles, and we have the Evergreen Utility Project. And last, we have the Coleman Road Extension, which is administered by the Clinton County Road Commission. So in total, about 1.5 miles paved, and the internal crews will maintain over 5 miles of streets. So with this, though, where are the impacts of COVID-19? So we look at that. So under fiscal year 20, we were going to update the non-motorized plan, but we delayed that because there are not participants in town to work with, because that's a public interactive process. We need the students, we need everyone out and about, and to have that proper interface. Also, you'll see the chart to the bottom left, the pavement surface evaluation and rating evaluation. That was delayed because just the functional realities, we had to put a couple people in a vehicle and drive all the streets. So that's going to happen later in the summer. But you can see from those trends there that were shown last year, you see a positive increase. But the other reality is that we expected a decrease in Act 51 revenue. People were driving less. So if there's fewer people driving, there's going to be less money coming in. We don't know what that is right now. And also there's the possible reduction in income tax availability to help fund infrastructure. And those are some of the realities in the Act 51. Any questions on the major street budget so far? All right, seeing none, I'll go to slide 3. But before I move on here, I forgot to mention the leadership team that's on here, or not logged in here directly, but they're sitting in the wings. You have Nicole McPherson, Engineering Administrator, Ron Lacoste, the Infrastructure Administrator, Kathy DeChambeau, the Environmental Administrator, and Paul Stokes, the Water Resource Recovery Facility Superintendent. They're in the background, they're texting me and making sure I hit the right things as well. So they're supporting me on this. So going to local streets, again, we receive Act 51 tax funds, and that's that major revenue. And so we use that money to maintain the over 62 miles of streets. And so you similar services as in the major streets. And the difference here, though, is we put more local income tax money towards that. And with that, we have, so for big projects, we have Stoddard from Grand River to Bertram, which will be combined with water. The Brookfield area of mill and fill of Oakland, Roseland, and Maplewood. We have Blanchette and Gainsborough that will be milled and filled. And we have Berkshire and King Court that will be a crush and shape of water. And also our internal crews will do skip paving, crack sealing, and other maintenance to extend the service life. The goal in fiscal year 21 is to improve 3 miles of streets and crack seal about 8 miles. And again, we have a great crew that's capable of doing this. And the one thing I mentioned on the major street, we are maintaining a significant fund balance, but we're also burning it significantly each year as we do projects as part of our capital improvement plan. Now, you see the similar impacts to COVID-19 in the local streets. The biggest of which was East Glen Phase 1 project. The fiscal year 20 project was delayed. The reason for that was it involved a large replacement of water main. We did not want to replace over a mile of water main in a pandemic condition and risk someone's water supply or have a disruption to that project. And also, when you're doing large construction with people at home, that is not pleasant. But we are going to continue on with fiscal year 20 projects that are smaller in scope. And again, the PACER was delayed, and then we'll have similar Act 51 decreases and income tax decreases. But as you see, we were starting to make progress turning poor streets fair, or turning fair streets good. And this is going to be the challenge here, is to contain sustained investment in the local street system. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, so going on to slide 4, the solid waste fund, and that's the curbside. This is our curbside collection of weekly trash, bi-weekly recycling, weekly bulk, seasonal yard waste. We provide 4 free yard waste collections a week. We have the recycling drop-off, styrofoam drop-off, all those great things that allow people to make an impact as to what they do. And also there's a lot of regional collaboration with the city of Lansing and other communities about recycling. And we also have the Bertram landfill closure process. Another thing we do, which is kind of unique, is the storm debris removal that we do that's unique from other communities. When there's a big windstorm or something, we go around and we pick it up. So the key updates here, there's no change to the millage. The recycling processing costs are expected to increase. And the big one is the transition from bags to stickers only. The big projects for this year, or 21, we're going to continue to monitor the Bertram landfill site, and that's part of the closure. And then they're going to continue the intergovernmental agreement with Lansing to open the material recovery facility on South Pennsylvania by the Board of Water and Light headquarters, just north of the north side of the river from the zoo. So the impacts from COVID-19 is we closed our drop-off center. You might say why? Well, because we're trying to reduce the staff demands and the amount of people touching that thing. And every time you drop-off recycling in particular revolves a lot of manual labor to remove contamination and other things. And also there's just a lot of recycling right now. Also, we've adjusted the service delivery for yard waste and bulk item collection. And honestly, we learned some things from COVID. Instead of doing a no-fee yard waste in the entire city in one day, we're looking at doing what we've been doing under this, is doing half the city one week and half the city the other week. It's a lot more manageable, it reduces costs, and it spreads out that burden, because we only have so many staff and so many trucks, and we take away that demand, or that the risk of having a truck go down and people running late. The biggest risk that's impacting recycling is a delay in opening the Lansing Material Recovery Facility. With that, construction has been delayed. So with that, the opening of the processing center has been delayed accordingly as well, the shutdown in construction. Also, we've seen a delay in replacement trucks, but we're seeing some good news there. We're seeing them we have an indication that they're going to be, some will be arriving sooner than later, but we've offset that risk through a rental truck of a single person operator truck. So we use automatic trucks primarily with one person in them as much as possible. We want to avoid having too many people in one truck, easier to operate, and it reduces exposure potential between employees. And unfortunately, the Recycle East Lansing event was canceled. And the last risk is as property taxes are impacted, so could revenue from the solid waste millage. And that's something we'll monitor in the future here. As you'll see in the 5-year projections, you see that we could potentially dip to a negative fund balance. But these are fairly conservative, and we'll monitor that as we go. But the goal would be to keep operating costs as low as possible, as we have been. Subject to your questions. Yep.
Do we have any estimation to, I guess, when we start opening things up, when that drop-off facility might be in the priorities of being opened?
So we're having those discussions internally, and maybe we would do a couple weeks after opening, maybe just recycle cardboard and styrofoam initially, and do the hard to recycle things. The one thing we've learned though, we're getting a lot of calls from people from outside of East Lansing that rely on that drop-off center. Yeah. And that's one of our challenges about fair share, who's paying for this? And that's the tough one. Of recycling costs money, but recycling is value added. And that would be a good regional discussion about a series of local or tri-county recycling centers, drop-off centers where people contributed.
Yeah.
Or the jurisdictions did.
No, that's great. I'm glad to hear it's part of the conversation. I just know that regionally that is a very important site, and that, I've had a community member to reach out to me asking similar questions. As a person that uses it myself, it's definitely something that I would want to see in the mix.
So hang on, Scott. So you're saying that when people bring, it actually is a net increase in cost to us when people bring recycling to that center. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. With the revenues, recycling's never been a break even. So what it does is offsets volume in the landfill. You're doing something positive with it, you'll get a revenue from the material. But currently under an environment where oil is super cheap, plastics have very little value. Then the problem with drop-off centers is contamination.
Right.
The best thing we did, frankly, to reduce contamination was having that foam drop-off center, because people were fishing out left and right. And the foam drop-off center, you think about it, you're reducing the equivalent of 2 elephants in the landfill each week. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, but so I don't know if we've talked about this, is just requiring people to be East Lansing residents when we open up, so that we could so that we don't have this problem of losing money and taking everybody else's recycling. Councilmember Meadows.
Yes, we have had that conversation. We had it in the 90s. And it turned out to be a very difficult thing to enforce. And, occasionally one of our own citizens would be asked for information. And so we abandoned it after about a year. And this was at the old DBW site where we had the drop off originally.
Right. And what I'm saying now is we are in new times and we don't have any money and people need to get their boxes recycled. And I'm all for doing something regional, but right now it's not regional. Right now it's in East Lansing, and East Lansing is bearing the cost of it. Councilmember Stevens, and then Councilmember Babcock.
I would just say, I think that in lesser maybe words than Councilmember Meadows put it, I think that opens up a little bit of bias, and I think that it'd be very difficult on enforcement, and I don't think that that's something that's feasible or something that I would be willing to support unless there was a really well thought out and executable plan to enforce that.
Councilmember Babcock?
I would agree. I think having grown up on the other side of 127 and having heard about that a whole lot, here we are trying to change the face of our community, and we're going to start carding people for drop-offs. I think the more constructive approach would be to have a regional discussion and perhaps call on Mayor Shore as well as others and do what's necessary to step up their opportunities. Carding people for recycling is not going to be a good answer.
Okay, I think you've got your direction there, Mr. House. There's no support for that.
No.
All right, can we go on, please?
Yeah,
Sorry, hang on. Sorry, Mr. House. We've got Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you. Just as a side note, if we are going to, I imagine there's going to be some kind of protocol or extra safety precautions for that drop-off center when open. Some kind of limit on the amount of people that'll be there, requirement of gloves, that kind of stuff. Whenever you guys have that sorted out, if we could just get a copy and some information on what extra safety measures are going to be taken, because I do think it's a great thing that we do, and a lot of people are probably looking towards it, but it is a risk. So I know that there's going to be conversations about mitigating that. Thanks.
Councilmember Gregg. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Councilmember Gregg.
I pride myself on never doing that, so sorry.
We all do it.
I wanted to add my voice to the regional discussion. Personally, I use the East Lansing drop-off, the Granger drop-off, the MSU surplus drop-off, and I know I'm not the only person that spreads my recycling around. So I think, rather than try to limit ours in some sort of proprietary way, I think really digging in on regional resources is the answer, and I would love to be part of that discussion.
Good to know you're part of the problem, Jesse.
Yeah. Hey, I have a lot of recycling.
I have been slapped down. All right, back to you,
Mayor,
Mr. House.
Mayor, if I may, this might be a good topic for the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission to discuss this, because this does impact the region and everyone generates this waste, and it would prevent dumping and just make the whole region more sustainable.
Okay,
Scott, if you want to bring it up at regional planning, we should connect via email and talk about next meeting.
All right, so I'm going on to slide 5. Now going to the water fund. So the water fund, the services, we maintain over 120 miles of main, just shy of 8,000 meters, 3 towers, 1 ground tank. We have people that read the meters, repair the leaks, flush the hydrants, inspect the construction, perform asset management, perform water quality tests, and perform cross-connection inspections. The key changes here is a 4.7 increase, which equals to about $1.69 a month. And also the capital connection charges, when someone builds a new building, the suggested fee increase is 10%. And the way that's derived is we had a better sense of what the value of our system was, less depreciation. The reason that's going up is we had better records and we've been investing in our system. And that sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of an impact. Now, the water increase, we talked about in prior years, we talked about a heavier level of increase. And then you'll see in the future years more flatlining that. In discussions with the city manager, we were talking about, well, let's see how this goes. Let's execute our projects and make sure that these impacts are not too heavy. On a future slide, you'll see where we rack and stack against other communities. This rate increase does allow us to generate the working capital to do projects. And as we look at the projects below, we see I list East Glencairn phase 1 carry forward. That cash flow is not baked into 21, but it's baked in 20 because that wasn't adjusted in the budget. Then you'll see the Collingwood water main from Ann to Bertram, the lead and copper rule replacements of over 40 a year. You'll see Melrose, Hagedorn to Timberlane, Berkshire and King, Stoddard, and you'll see Bertram valves, the Evergreen Utilities water, and then a water meter pilot where we want to look at ways to get into more advanced radio read meters so people could understand if they have a leak or a high water bill. So the goal, though, would be to, in 21 alone funded projects, would be to improve just under 2 miles of water. And you look at the fund balances, we're spending a lot of money each year going out. We maintain a healthy fund balance until we get out to 23, where that shows a cash funding of a water tower. We don't know if we would do that, be able to afford that yet, because we don't know the impacts from COVID yet. When we looked at the impacts from COVID, we've discontinued water turnoffs and we're delaying certain activities. So our revenue will be down from delinquent bills. The East Glencairn phase 1 project is delayed. We foresee the revenue is down due to reduced population. Less students are using water. And also the key thing we're doing, we're limiting the activity that would disrupt someone's water supply to their home or require entry into a certain person's home. So we want to be cognizant of the impact of construction on a large scale, but this also impacts lead and copper rule where we have to send people into their basement. And those are things that we're taking a pause on and that will continue later. Also, Elmswell, who we buy our water from, you'll see some increases there in time. And what's happening with Elmswell, they're starting their renewal process. What that means, they have a plant that's about built in the 70s, and they're starting to do capital replacements and improvements to prepare that infrastructure for the next 50 years. There's going to be about $17 million of investment there over the next 5 years, and that's going to include raw water, transmission lines, and wells. Subject to your questions. All right. Seeing none, we'll go to slide 6. So at the sewer fund, so this is a big fund. The services here, you have the water resource recovery, operations and maintenance, and then we also have the collection system of over 79 miles of sanitary sewers, 44 miles of combined sewers, 3 pump stations, 1 CSO retention basin. We have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of concrete, a lot of motors, a lot of steel. And we have a great crew that runs that. Also, we have a field crew that was running all over the city the past few days, televising, responding to high water events. We have the front office that will take the calls and can address people's concerns about what's going on with the sewer system. We have engineers running asset management, designing and inspecting things, and construction management. And our ultimate thing we do is we want to maintain compliance with our permits to make sure that whatever we discharge into the Red Cedar meets that permit criteria, so we're not being a detriment to the environment. Now, the key change here is the rate changes of about 4.5%, which is $2.29 a month impact. Also, a similar capital connection increase. Now with the projects, though, we still have big projects. And with this big infrastructure, anything at the wharf, we split with Meridian Township and MSU. MSU pays 40%, Meridian Township 33.3%, and we pay 26.67%. So we're going to complete the digester for about $9.8 million. Also, we're going to complete the Michigan Avenue project, about $2 million of work that will continue into 21. We're going to complete the Woodingham pump station. It's about $1.5 million. And in fact, yesterday was a critical point in that project with the last sheet pile removed. And that, thankfully, we're past that. From there, it's going to be a more urbane construction site. There'll be construction noises, but not like sheet piling. Now, the big thing for 21 is the design and bid of SRF Phase 4. What that is, aeration and clarifier improvements, and I have a slide on that. So again, and I'll talk this later, but we have a bunch of old infrastructure there that we can't outrun. And also we have the $500,000 of miscellaneous lining that was approved in this fiscal year that's going to be carried forward for execution in 21. We're doing an upgrade to, or life cycle maintenance to the combined sewer overflow retention treatment basin on Kalamazoo. That's a big tank where combined sewage is stored and treated and released in high flow events and rain events, such as what we just witnessed. And then we also have some regulator improvements. We're going to improve the capacity of certain flow control devices to help improve combined sewers so they flow better. We're updating 1930s technology with technology from 2020, better hydrology to make sure that things perform better. Then we'll have the Evergreen Sewer, and we project that we'll have sewer repairs of every project. It's inevitable. But every street we work on, we always televise it, and we'll do the spot repairs and things so we don't pave over a problem and regret it in 3 years. So in general, we're looking at 0.9 miles. It's not as impressive as the water, but we're doing big investments, and we're fixing critical areas. And we look at the cash flow here. We receive a lot of money from debt proceeds and we spend it. So it kind of skews the size of this fund. And when you look at last year, 65 million, or this year, 65 million, and the future years, it's about 30 million each. And we have regular discussions with MSU and Meridian Township about their ability to bear the cost of these improvements, including more recently, the design costs for the aeration, which is going to be about a $2 million cash funded project. And we're going to have cost discussions with them as we move forward as well to make sure that they understand or are able to fund that, because certain things we can delay. Now, the impacts from COVID-19, again, the East Glencairn Phase 1 project's delayed. Wharf construction was interrupted for several weeks during the shutdown. So the projects were mothballed, and there was the construction company, general contractors were there daily to inspect things. We also foresee a revenue reduction due to population. And, uniquely, we've been working on the collection system more because there's more people home using the collection system. And we had to do a lot more education about early on. Ron Lacoste had to reach out to communications about educating people about what not to flush down the toilet and things. But the team's been doing a good job monitoring and inspecting things. And so it's been a good news story there. Are there any questions on this one? All right, if seeing none, we'll go to slide 7. So looking at utility rates, the East Lansing proposed are shown, and then you'll see other neighboring jurisdictions in 20. This is what we're proposing, and this is comparing against people's last fiscal year utility rates are. So we look at where do we stack compared to Lansing, and we look at Meridian Township at the low end with really great rates. And really, this is not about, it's good to benchmark, but again, we have infrastructure in different times and different needs. So we're paying our shares now. In the future, people with lower rates will have to pay those in the future. And it's part of investing and maintaining an infrastructure. Over the past few years, we've been investing heavily, making key progress. So we're having to discuss, we've been bringing less bad news stories to you about $200,000 sinkholes. Instead, we're doing $200,000 lining projects covering a lot more ground. We're updating technology from the 60s. We're updating sewers that were constructed at the beginning of the city. We're doing things that will extend their service life, so there is a cost. But we are cognizant of the impact of people. Any questions on the rate side? Seeing none. So looking at the CIP, all these projects were talked about in the prior slides, but this is kind of a synopsis of where they are. Now I'm going to start at the Abbott Road and just kind of go around the horn real quick. So we have the Abbott Road. So you see it from Saginaw to Lake Lansing. That would be the federal aid project. Then we have Gainsborough and Blanchette, local street mill and fill. We have the combined sewer rehab. We have the regulator repairs there on Sunset. We have the Evergreen Utilities, which will be water, sewer, and streets. We have the regulators on Center and Beale. We have the Harrison Road concrete joint replacement south of Michigan Avenue. We're seeking grant funding for that. That's not a guaranteed project, but we're going to seek TEDF project funding from MDOT to improve that, because starting next week, you're going to see, or even this week, Harrison Road between Saginaw and Michigan, or Grand River and Michigan, is going to be, the construction is going to start on that. So this will be the worst part of Harrison Road there going into MSU. And then we walk around, we have the poor section of sidewalk along Michigan Avenue, right at the corner there. We've received multiple complaints. That's going to be our hazardous sidewalk. We have the Charles and Division Streets mill and fill. So that will reset downtown, where all the downtown streets will be in good condition. Then you'll see the Collingwood water and sewer completing what we were doing. Then going to the bottom right, Roseland, Oakland, and Maplewood mill and fill. Then we have the Stoddard Street and water. Then we have Melrose Street and water. Then on Bircham Avenue, we have large valve replacement. That means we have large diameter water main with valves that are not in good shape. So that's going to be a big process to pull those out of service and replace those. So if we ever have a break, we'll be able to control the flow of water and help us better maintain the system. And then lastly, we have the King and Berkshire Street and water projects. So in total, we're looking at 3 miles of local streets, 1.4 mile of major streets, 1.9 miles of water, about a mile of sewer, and a quarter mile of sidewalk. Now, the impacts of COVID-19 has had impacts on projects. We don't know what's going to do to the construction force. We don't know what's going to do to revenue. So that will have impacts on CIP. Some of these things here might shift into 22. And we'll come back to you with a project priority list for you to give us direction on. But until we have clarity as to where the funding will land, that will give us time to adjust things. And there's some things that will be lower risk and higher risk. Any questions on this slide?
I will just say, Mr. House, that is quite a graphic right there. You got a lot of information on one piece of paper. Very nicely done.
Thank you. And that's a lot of work. And so even right now, engineering staff is all over the place. They are jumping. And there's a joke I have with Nicole McPherson. She's like, do things ever slow down? I'm like, well, not really. But it's good though. We're maintaining pressure.
Good.
If there's no questions, we'll go to slide 9. So Coleman Road extension, that was base paved last week. You can see the picture upper left is on the township side. The picture on the lower right is on the city side. There will be a 10-foot path all connecting it on the north side all the way. There will be an 8-foot path on the south side, on the East Lansing side. If a mid-block crossing, we'll have an island, and we'll have a protected crossing. We also had some sidewalk gap filling part of the project on the East Lansing side, and on the township side. Solar street lights are being prepared. They're developing a package to bid out and to install solar street lights. That would be a good project to allow us to gain operational experience here to see we know what the upfront costs are, but we don't know what it will take to maintain these. And, will the wind blow the solar panels off? Will people like the level of light? How will we figure out to maintain them? So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of goodness in this. And with those lessons learned, we'll be able to extrapolate that technology elsewhere if it's successful. Any questions on the Coleman Road project? Okay. If none, we'll go to slide 10.
Quick
Evergreen
question,
Utilities.
Scott.
Yep.
Summer of 2020, is that like mid-late? Where is that hitting?
That could be in a couple weeks. Okay. All
right, because it looks, looks astonished. Awesome. Okay, goes up.
Thanks. So next slide. Evergreen Utilities, we're continuing to have discussions. We have some conceptual plans. We want to maintain pressure on this because we want to get our sewer and our water, and that's essential this summer. But we're being cognizant of the DDA project and working with People's Church to make sure that we align things. But we're also looking at MSU, SCU, and how does that tie in? So this is a big coordinated effort, and I really appreciate council's leadership in supporting this project because it's allowing us to get at the table and provide solutions ahead of things and in coordination with other projects. There's no questions there. We'll go to slide 11. So this is just a recap of the Michigan Avenue. We're wrapping this up. This has the total project, and this is an overview. A ton of work was done. In fact, this week they were lining the siphon on the southeast portion of the project along the Harrison Bridge over the Red Cedar. Lots of good things here, and soon we'll see Michigan Avenue milled and filled with new pavement. And that project, you'll see restoration and trees planted. That project's faced a lot of challenges of high water. There's a joke with the contractor, every time you guys start working on the river, near the river, the water jumps up to bank full. And that's been a challenge for them, and they've been very resilient in their process there. Any questions on the Harrison and Michigan sewer improvements? If not, we'll go to the next slide. And so the headworks and grit removal, this is one of the phase 2 project with the work. So it's the headworks where everything comes into the plant. Basically the heart. So the headworks is in operation. The grit system, which are those weird concrete tanks to the right, and the picture's on the upper side, that removes fine silt and sand from the system to avoid corrosion. The grit removal and the headworks are in operation. What remains to be completed is underground work, including underground work at the plant. We have some lining to do of some 54-inch sewer. We have some underground piping to do and some integration. But it's a great project, saves us a lot of money. It's once things clear up, it'd be nice to do a river. We were discussing doing a ribbon cutting before this COVID hit. And as things clear up, it'd be nice to do a ribbon cutting then too long before we have to do it at the digester as well. There are no questions there. We'll go to slide 13. So Whittingham Pump Station. So things are going well on that. They are exiting the ground. You can see it on the lower left picture. We're going to start seeing things going vertical. All the sheet piling has been removed. That's going along well. It's a very tight site, and it's, you look back and why did someone why didn't they maintain a bigger lot? But we always get painted in by the decisions of our predecessors. But the contractor is making it work, and they're doing a good job here, and we expect that to be completed in October of 2020. There's no questions there. We'll go to the next slide. So solids handling and digestion. So they've made a ton of work there. That's maintaining progress. You can see the big blue tank that will be wrapped. That's the digester vessel. And you'll see the tank where there's a sludge storage tank, and then the generator system will be starting to arrive. We're making great progress on that. And also, you see there the inside of a future sludge storage tank. It's a giant tank, but good things are happening there, and we're making good progress on that as well. And we expect that to be done in the spring of 21.
Could I just jump in quick? I just want to accentuate the point to this project. The solids handling and digestion really is, I think it's a great project for the city of East Lansing. When you think about the amount of energy that this plant uses on a regular basis, to have this kind of a green infrastructure to serve the community for the next 30 or 40 years of the backup power, but also the digestion of offsetting that operational power that the plant uses going forward, it really is an excellent project. I think this is probably our best green project that we've ever done in the city in terms of overall impact. So great work by your crew in coming up with this and making it happen and getting all the buy-in from our partners. But it's a great project, and thanks for council support on it.
I would agree. If there's no questions there, go to slide 15. So this is the phase 4 aeration and clarifiers. Now, we've replaced the UV. We took care of the most decrepit side of the work at the tail end. We replaced the headworks. We're redoing the solids and digestion. Now we're going after the original version, the aeration. The aeration is a huge energy consumer. We have giant blowers that just blow, that bubble wastewater all the time. We have antiquated systems. We have gates that do not operate. We have original vintage items that are beyond their service life. We talked about, could we do these things piecemeal? In our initial plans, we had consultants say that, hey, you might be able to do this for $6 million, but when we started to go through it and peel the onion, no, there was just a lot of work to do. And with that, we have clarifiers that do various things to separate out the sewage and the solids. And back 3 weeks ago, we had a primary clarifier that broke off, that failed. And we had low flow, so we could afford to have it out of service. But when we look at old valves that are rusted and poor shape, so this is one of those things where sometimes you have to spend money to save money, but this is one of those jobs where if we get the right aerators in there, the right controls, that we will save ourselves money, we'll expand our capacity, and we might even get loan forgiveness as well. But also when we look at shovel-ready projects, if there's some type of infrastructure funding from the federal level, this project and several other projects might be great projects to offer up. They go, hey, we have plans, we have specifications, we are ready to go. And those are opportunities. And we look at the cost, the cost of the debt service for this is baked in. And we look at, if we were to delay these improvements, then we get pushed into ever more the reactive level of maintenance. And we've done a lot of work at the WRF, and we really greatly appreciate the support of council in getting there, because it's tough to, when you're the fiduciary for a regional asset, to get the money from regional partners and to make needed investments. It's tough, but these are critical things that will pay dividends in the future. When we look at the cost, $34 million, our portion would be 26.67, Meridian Township 33.33, and MSU 40%. So we're seeking. We're currently interviewing consultants to do a design for this, and we can go through several gates before we jump off on this. There's a lot of rigor and process for this, and this is something we'd like to see to go forward. But we understand there can be some constraints from COVID. But at least getting the designs ready and going down the runway as far as possible. And if it's not feasible given current financial conditions, we can delay, but there might be a tremendous amount of opportunity here. So, any questions on this?
Mr. House, I really appreciate your leadership on this, and the fact that you're thinking that this may well be an opportunity if the federal government gets itself together and does some kind of public work financing. This would be excellent. I think every council member has toured this facility or will be eventually. And it is scary how rusty some of that very important infrastructure is. And I agree, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be hard, but we're going to have to do it.
I think the other thing, if I might, Mayor, is that's amazing is that this is one of those pieces of infrastructure that has to work continually, 365, 7 days a week. It has to be perfect and work, where obviously there's environmental consequences. But the fact that they're able to reconstruct this aging plant and have that level of expertise and do the daily work that they have to do to treat the flow while reconstructing the plant on that site really is amazing. It's a testament to a great operation, a great crew that run the plant. So
Yep.
Thanks, Scott.
I am very impressed. I'm very impressed with the performance over there, with what you have to work with, and the fact that you do all these workarounds. I would like to, as one council person, I support doing what we need to do to get that funding going.
I second that.
So that concludes our budget presentation. So if you have any questions.
Mr. Meadows.
I don't have a question. Again, I don't have a question. I just want to compliment Scott. This is, a terrific way to present the budget to us. And I know you've done this for several years for us at this point in time, but it always is a terrific presentation. I want to mention just a couple of things. They're not in the budget here, but I want us to continue to consider ordering the sidewalk in on the north side of Coleman between the Hawk Nest area and where we will now have a complete sidewalk on the north side that is west of Coolidge. We need to get that in. We have a school there, and we need to be able to get those school children there safely. And then I don't know if there's been additional conversations with the Clinton County Drain Commissioner about filling in that drain that's next to Hawk Nest on Coleman Road so that we can extend the sidewalk to the city limits from Shearwater to the city limits. But I hope those conversations are continuing. And then finally, we've got numerous gaps on the west side of Coolidge Road, south of Coleman Road. And I'd like to see us order those in at some point in the near future. So those are my only comments. I know those are things we've talked about before, and I hope they're still in the works.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Thank you. So I just, again, to second, I've gone through this at least, well, this is my third time going through this, and every single time I'm very impressed with the way that this is presented, especially considering how many moving parts there are within our sewer system, water system, streets. It is easily digestible, not to make a pun, but and I think it's done very well. So thank you for that. Especially with uncertainty that's going on right now. So this is an overall question during our budget process, but a while ago, and I mean a while ago, probably 2018 mid, when we were talking about implementation of the income tax, the interest of keeping the public informed of what we are using income tax funds for on our website as a separate page. I know that we have our income tax page. The majority of that information, of course, is for employers and for other folks, for COVID related responses and for delays and for returns. But I still would like to see a place where anybody in the community can go and see where their income tax dollars are going, that being separate from our actual budget document itself. Obviously, the income tax fund in our document that was given to us is very well done and explains it in a very good way. However, as we're going through all these funds, we've now seen a few different instances of, rather than just it being a transfer out of fund, we see where the project actually goes in local streets, where the project actually goes for Parks and Rec and those things. So I know that we're in a time of uncertainty and we don't know where that income tax is going to end up. However, I'd still like to see a page on our website dedicated to show where we are at least budgeting the income tax dollars specifically. So that way people that voted for it know that we're keeping our promises along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else? All right, I believe that was our last agenda item, Mr. Lahanas.
Yeah, so I'd like to just have Finance Director Feldpass just walk us through sort of the next steps to approval next week and any sort of last minute wrap up. So, Jill?
Sure. So next week we will present you with the resolution for adoption of the budget, the tax rate, and the fee schedule. So you might recall in the budget document at the very back, there's the fee schedule in there. There hasn't been a lot of conversation about that. So if there's other adjustments you'd like to see in the resolution, I guess I would like some direction on that tonight outside of parking. I didn't hear of any other changes. So that would be one area of concern that I have, if there's other things that you guys would like to see. And then we'll also present a memo showing the changes from the preliminary document to the resolution.
Okay, I don't have any other areas that I need to see. Anybody else want to give some direction? Mr. Meadows, and then
I don't have any direction to give other than I don't have any changes right now. But even last year, I think we adjusted some of the fees on the night that we adopted it. So I think if anybody goes through this and they do have an issue, we can still deal with it at that point in time.
I don't know if you mentioned this, but do we?
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Lahanas.
Do we want to add an amount? We could also have an added amount for the diversity and inclusion training as well. So
Yes, I would like that added in. So,
Yep.
do we have to decide that amount right now?
I think $10,000 would be reasonable, but if you wanted to add more, I think that would be reasonable. Of course, if it comes in more than that, we could always come back to council when we get a contract with somebody. But I think probably $10,000 would be a reasonable increase to that, and that would give us $40,000 for the staffing the committee and for training, for citywide training.
I like your 10. I'd like to raise you another 10 to 20. What do you think, Councilmember Greg?
50 is the number that I had in mind, just based on my conversation with the one nonprofit. She gave me kind of a window of 25 to 100 that she thought would be reasonable. And I thought 50 would be a good place for us to start, considering that we have only imaginary money at this point. Any increase would be appreciated, but I think I would want it to be substantial enough that we could really get what we need to get out of that. So I don't want to short ourselves.
Councilmember Meadows.
I would agree to 10,000, and I would just suggest that we use that money to actually pay for some of the research necessary to find out how much this will really cost us, and then do a budget amendment to add the money there. So we don't have to decide that tonight because we really don't have the figures.
Okay, so I think that unless somebody interrupts me and says this is not true, that all 5 council people want to do this project and are willing to amend the budget when we need to do this project.
Yeah.
Okay,
That would
so
be a
that's where we are, Jill. That's all we need right now. I don't think we need an amendment right now. Councilmember Stevens, did you have something, or were you just agreeing?
No, I had one other thing that was separate actually on the fee schedule. This was just kind of an overall thing, and I know that this got kind of cut short with COVID, but did we receive any of the actual fees from the e-scooters that we had labeled out 10 cents per ride? Was that something that was working? Was it something that was a burden, that kind of stuff? Just wondering on figures.
I don't know.
Jill, is Jennifer on the phone? I think Jennifer's on the line. Jennifer,
Yes, can you hear me?
if she could speak to that. Yes, I hear you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. Yes. So for the 2 scooter companies that we had last year, we did have a few $100s that we got between the 2 of them, just for the per ride fee. And again, we're collecting those monthly when they're in operation.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering, that's just the first year we've had that fee. So I was wondering if it was something that was well received or not. I probably will have some follow-up questions at the next meeting, as well as some other things and some of the other funds that we've had. But as Councilmember Meadows said, we can make amendments when we get to the budget next week, I believe. But Jill, if you might not want to look out for an email from me, so I apologize.
That's good.
Anything else? All right, are we now at the end of the agenda, Mr. Lahanas?
We are.
All right, then this meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Everybody.